Hey y'all, I'm James Roy, and we're going to call this Rockets Rants. I recently expressed on Twitter that I want to talk more about other Houston sports teams outside of the Texans. I'm the host of Texans Takes with James Roy, and so this is my forum to express how I feel about Houston's very own Rockets. So today I'm going to explain kind of where I'm coming from as a fan. We'll talk about the franchise cornerstones, the lottery, and some Harden talk. So I was born the same day that the 1995 Rockets, the lowest seeded team in NBA history to win the championship, clinched the NBA Finals back in 95. So I was basically born to be a Rockets fan. For the longest time, until 2017, basically, my birthday marked the amount of time that had passed since the city of Houston had seen a championship outside of the Dynamo in 06 and 07. The James Harden years are probably the most memorable years for me, though early on I did get a Yao Ming jersey for Christmas. My brother got Stephen Francis, and I vaguely followed the Rockets. The NBA is not a primary sport that I follow, but I do like to keep up with the Rockets. So let's talk about the franchise cornerstones for the Rockets. So in my eyes, the franchise cornerstones for the Rockets are Alperen Şengün, Jalen Green, and Jabari Smith Jr. I think that Kevin Porter, I don't know, some people would feature him in that category. I just don't quite buy it. So with that, I think those three players are untouchable in any sort of trade. We talk about the situations in the lottery where the Rockets come up just outside of the top two, which is really at this point, if you're not top two, the tank was for nothing. I feel that 100%. The Rockets either need a point guard or they need Victor Wembanyama. There's really no in between. Anything less than that is mission failure. With that, you then start to talk about, well, what would we be willing to trade to move up, say, if we drew three? And I think that it depends on what team draws two. Obviously, if the Pistons draw two, I don't think they're taking Scoot Henderson because they have Cade Cunningham. I've been proven wrong before. But that's just my guess. I don't know if the Rockets are willing to take that bet. But when you land outside of the top two, you have to start thinking about who you're willing to ship off. And to me, those three players are untouchable. So then you start to look at, well, who do we have that's even worth trading? You look at Tari Eason, you look at KJ Martin, you look at Kevin Porter Jr., who I don't know what his market even looks like, but he's worth mentioning in this conversation. And then Jae'Sean Tate, and then you've got all the picks that the Rockets got through the trade of James Harden. Now, it'd be really great if James Harden signed back with the Rockets and then they traded all those picks and get talent. But I think personally, if you don't land number one in the lottery, which I think Harden's going to take his time, I don't think the Harden signing is a concern before the lottery. But if you land one in the lottery, you might more heavily consider James Harden than if you land two. Because I feel like as useful as Harden would be to kind of mentor Scoot Henderson, at the same time, you don't have James Harden on your roster and Scoot Henderson and not play both of them significantly. And it raises a lot of questions on the starting lineup. Personally, Alperen Şengün to me is the least tradable piece of them. I think that he's an offensive hub. I like watching him play. I'd be disappointed. I bought an Alperen Şengün jersey, and so I'm not going to lie, as someone who watches the team and gets attached to players, if Alperen Şengün got traded, I'd be pretty disappointed. I like that the Jabari Smith Jr. is developing. I like that he's finally finding himself. And I'd like to see him progress once he enters his persona as number 10, since Eric Gordon vacated that number, rest in peace, on the Clippers. I guess he's in a better place. But yeah, as far as the franchise cornerstones go, those are players that I don't think would be touchable. And honestly, I'd be super disappointed if Şengün went. And some people don't feel that way. Like a rational fan probably thinks that Alperen Şengün's the easiest person to trade because if you pick up Wembanyama, then you can justify trying to sell high on Şengün, but I just don't want any of those players to leave. I just want to bring in more talent that can be put into the spots around them, and I want the team to win. It's a weird dilemma. I'm getting overly attached to players that have played for such a trash team. We already briefly kind of talked about the lottery, but I mean, I'll reiterate it. I think that if the Rockets end up outside of the top two, you then have to entertain trade talks. I really don't want to entertain trade talks. There's some trade talks that I do want to entertain for players like Jaylen Brown, moving around and getting pieces. Say we do end up number one and we need to get a true a point guard in the eyes of the Rockets. Maybe a player like Fred VanVleet. I trust that Ime Udoka has probably already put a lot of thought into this, and he knows a lot more than I do. There's a lot of you out there that know a lot more than I do about Rockets basketball. But I mean, I think that we'd be better fit to use our trade pieces to make moves to get players that are in the league that are proven, instead of using all of our trade assets to move up one or two spots in the draft to get a player that's supposed to be a really great prospect. Because it's just been too many times in the past where a truly great prospect gets picked and doesn't pan out. So if the lottery doesn't pan out the way we want, we're not in the top two, I'd still rather see them use the trade assets to maybe move around on the roster to get players that, instead of moving up in the draft. There has been a lot of talk of James Harden, a lot of reports saying that it's all but certain if the Sixers lose. Newsflash, the Sixers lost in a historic fashion to the Celtics in Game 7. Who'd have thought that Doc Rivers, being who he is, would have lost a Game 7 in the NBA playoffs? That is a total shocker. So with that, Harden talk is going to ignite, or it already has. It's already exploded further, or far more than it already was at. It's pretty much all that Rockets Twitter is going to be through the lottery. I mean, obviously there's the next couple of days until the lottery happens. I don't think that the Rockets would make a move on Harden prior to knowing where they're at in the lottery. It's just a matter of, what does he bring to the table, and should the Rockets bring him in? I think that James Harden brings a lot to the table. There's recent reports that Tyrese Maxey has says that Harden really helped him progress into the player that he is now. There's some people that are so adamant about getting Harden that they've kind of tried to ignore the argument against him in the playoffs by saying that the Rockets don't intend to be a playoff team while he's here. He's just here to develop talent. That's an interesting perspective to me, because I think that James Harden wants to win championships. So I don't think he comes to Houston just out of the kindness of his heart. I think he comes to Houston if he thinks he's got a real chance of boosting that team to championship contention. The question of whether or not he's capable of doing that with any team is to be determined. A lot of people will say it's been determined by history, but I guess we'll find out soon enough. But if you want my personal opinion, nostalgia me wants him on the team. I want to sign him and have him end his career with the Rockets. Logical me says if we pulled one or anything less than the top two, maybe you pull in James Harden to be that bridge point guard until you find your guy in the next draft or two. And then, if you do pull two and you draft Scoot Henderson, if Harden's willing to come in and mentor him, sure, but Scoot has to be the starter coming in the number 2 pick. I don't see a world where you sign James Harden and start him over Scoot Henderson and then have Henderson come off the bench. So it's just a tough sell in my eyes. Obviously, it could be something that's a possibility. Maybe that's what he wants to do. Maybe he loves the city of Houston, wants to be here, but I don't know what's going on in James Harden's head. Well, this has been Rockets Rants. I'm James Roy. I host Texans Takes if you're a Texans fan. So that's on this channel. It's also available on the Bullpen Podcast Network. If you want to follow me on social media, it's at M1 Texans Fan. And until next time, thanks for watching.